I'm Marlo. And let me tell you, nothing hits harder than realizing your own family made a place for you at the kids' table. At my sister's birthday, I showed up, dressed like an adult, expected to be treated like family, and instead, they sat me with the children like I didn't belong. But that wasn't the worst part. That night, I walked away quietly. But what I didn't know was how deep the cracks ran. The lies, the manipulation, the betrayal. It didn't start at that party. It started long before, when they decided I'd always be the outsider. And what I uncovered after I left, well, let's just say, it nearly burned the whole family down. So why would a family go so far to erase one of their own? It started with a ping. A family group chat notification lit up my phone that Thursday afternoon while I was buried in paperwork at my apartment in Houston. Clarissa Carter, Mom. Hey Marlo! Hope you can make it Saturday. We're throwing Celine's birthday at the Monarch. Saved you a seat with the family and kids. Let me know. It wasn't an invitation. It was a reminder, a subtle signal of where I stood. A seat with the kids, again. Like always, I stared at the message, wondering why I still let it sting. But I didn't respond right away. I'd learned to swallow that feeling, like background noise you live with. As the weekend neared, the group chat lit up with excitement about the rooftop dinner, the cake, the guest list, and that old weight settled in my chest again. Familiar, quiet, heavy. Saturday came too fast. I worked most of the day, tempted to use my workload as an excuse. But guilt, or duty, won out. At 6:45 p.m., I pulled on a navy blue dress that felt more like armor than fashion. By 7:30, I was driving down I-45 toward Austin, headlights cutting through the dark. I told myself I wasn't going for them. I was going because if I didn't, they'd say I was difficult, dramatic, playing the victim. By 8:45, I was outside the Monarch, an upscale rooftop spot glowing with fairy lights. Luxury cars lined the valet. I checked my reflection, forced a smile, and stepped inside. I knew immediately I didn't belong here, not really. Laughter rang out too loud. Conversations felt too curated. The hostess greeted me with a careful smile. Name? Marlo Carter, I said, smoothing my dress. She scanned her list too long. Ah, table C, with the family and kids. She gestured to a corner near the railing. High chairs, crayons, booster seats. I swallowed the heat rising in my chest and walked over. The kids barely looked up. The adults were at the bar, glasses clinking, deep in conversation. Clarissa passed me once, champagne in hand. She gave me a nod and kept walking. Celine stood glowing at the center, the star of the night, surrounded by admiration. I sat at table C, invisible. People noticed. Their looks said it all, pity, amusement. She's still here, still trying. It wasn't just about the seat. It was the years of being overlooked, the forgotten birthdays, the holiday photos I was asked to take, not be in. Always the quiet one, the dependable one, so Celine could shine. At 9:30, the lights dimmed. Clarissa took the mic. Thank you for coming to celebrate our shining star, Celine, she said. She thanked everyone, Celine's friends, Cassian's family, the kids, the staff, even the bartender, but not me. By 9:45, I stood up and left. Quietly. No one noticed. No one stopped me. At the door, I glanced back. Celine laughed, radiant, adored. I walked away. What I didn't know was that walking out wouldn't be the end. It would be the start of everything unraveling. I didn't stop walking until the glow of the Monarch's rooftop lights faded behind me, swallowed by the Austin skyline. The sound of glasses clinking and fake laughter still echoed in my ears as I reached my car parked 2 blocks away. I slipped behind the wheel, sat there for a moment, staring blankly at the steering wheel, trying to shake off the tightness in my chest. As I sat in the driver's seat, the memory of Clarissa's voice from just minutes ago played on a cruel loop inside my head. Thank you all for coming to celebrate our shining star, Celine. And to all our wonderful guests, Cassian's family, Celine's friends, and of course, our amazing family. Her words floated above the crowd like confetti, warm, inclusive, until they weren't. Because when her eyes swept the tables, they passed over mine like I wasn't even there. I remembered how she thanked the kids at my table, thanked the staff, even thanked the damn bartender, but never once said my name. By the time I started the car and pulled away from the curb, it was almost 10 p.m. The streets of downtown Austin buzzed with people spilling out of restaurants, couples holding hands, groups laughing too loud. I kept driving in silence. Halfway back to Houston, headlights slicing through the night, I felt it. This dull ache under my ribcage that wasn't just from tonight. It was an old wound, something I'd learned to carry, like a chipped tooth you learn not to bite down on. Because tonight wasn't new, it was just the most public. As the miles passed beneath me, my mind went back, like it always did, to all the moments that built this one. I thought about Christmas dinners when Clarissa would gush about Celine's promotions or her perfect boyfriend, then glance at me with that empty smile, as if she couldn't remember what I'd been doing that year. I thought about high school graduations, family BBQs, birthdays, especially birthdays. My knuckles tightened around the steering wheel when a memory I hadn't let myself touch in years resurfaced. I was 12. It was a gray February afternoon, and I came home from school to find Clarissa busy frosting cupcakes, balloons taped across the kitchen cabinets. My heart jumped. Maybe she remembered. Except the balloons were pink and silver, and the cupcakes were for Celine's 10th birthday. My birthday had been 3 weeks earlier. I'd spent it alone in my room with a store-bought cake I picked up myself. That night, when I finally asked Mom why she hadn't done anything, she smiled like I'd asked something silly. "You're older now, Marlo. You don't need all that." As if growing up meant you stopped deserving to be seen. I let the memory settle heavy in my chest as I merged onto Interstate 10. The clock on the dashboard blinked 11:45 p.m. By the time I reached Houston and pulled into my apartment complex, it was after midnight. The city was quieter here, streetlights casting long shadows across the empty parking lot. I parked, climbed the stairs to my second-floor unit, and unlocked the door to the stillness waiting inside. I kicked off my heels, set my phone face down on the counter without checking it, and walked straight to the living room window. Outside, the city lights stretched out like tiny fires, and for a long moment, I just stood there, breathing. It hit me then, how exhausted I was. Not from the drive, but from everything leading up to tonight. From years of pretending the crumbs they tossed my way were enough. The speech, the empty chair, the kids' table. It wasn't about the party. It never had been. It was about being invisible in a family that smiled for photos, but never saw me standing right there. Somewhere deep down, I knew this night would change something. I didn't know how or when, but there was a shift inside me. A thread pulled too tight, finally snapping loose. I turned away from the window, grabbed my phone, and checked it without thinking. 3 missed texts, all from Clarissa. "You didn't have to leave like that. It was Celine's night. I hope you're not making this about you again. Call me when you calm down." I laughed under my breath, low, humorless, the audacity. I set the phone back down and stood in the middle of my apartment, realizing for the first time that night, I was done trying to belong. I walked out of that party thinking I was leaving the past behind. But what I didn't know then was that walking away wasn't the end. It was the beginning of the reckoning. The texts from Clarissa were still sitting on my phone when I woke up the next morning, as if they'd been waiting all night to remind me I was the problem. I'd left my phone face down on the kitchen counter before collapsing into bed around 1 a.m., too drained to deal with anyone's guilt trip messages. When I finally rolled out of bed at 8 a.m., sunlight cutting through the slats of my blinds, the weight of last night returned before my feet even touched the floor. I made coffee on autopilot, trying to shake the heaviness in my chest. It wasn't just exhaustion. It was that old gnawing ache, the one that started years before anyone sent me a text saying I was too sensitive. The coffee maker beeped, pulling me back. I poured a mug, sat down on the edge of my couch, and finally picked up my phone. More messages. Clarissa again. You didn't have to leave like that. It was Celine's day. A second one, time-stamped after midnight. Honestly, Marlo, you could have just smiled and gotten through the night. Why do you always have to make it about you? And then Celine. Hers arrived just after 1:30 a.m. Grow up, Marlo. You've always needed to be the center of attention. You couldn't let me have one night without making a scene. I stared at the screen, the bitter taste in my mouth sharper than the coffee. There it was. Even when I quietly walked away, even when I didn't say a word, they still blamed me. I put the phone down, but my thoughts kept circling like vultures. This wasn't new. It wasn't the first time they painted me as selfish for reacting to being overlooked. I'd spent a lifetime walking that tightrope. If I spoke up, I was dramatic. If I stayed quiet, I disappeared. The pattern was so familiar, so rehearsed, it almost made me laugh. But underneath that numbness, something sharper stirred. After I showered and dressed, I spent the rest of the morning cleaning, scrubbing counters that were already spotless, rearranging books that didn't need moving. Anything to keep myself from sitting still long enough to let the rage catch up to me. By noon, I gave up pretending I could avoid it. I sat back down on the couch, scrolling through my phone again, wondering if the weight in my chest would ever let up. That's when I saw it. One unread message at the bottom of the pile. From Dad. Edgar Carter wasn't the kind of man who sent texts at all, much less in the middle of family chaos. But there it was, sent at 2:07 a.m. Marlo, I'm sorry. I should have said something years ago. I knew how they treated you. I was just too weak to stop it. The words blurred on the screen. For a long moment, I didn't move. I just stared, letting the words land like a quiet earthquake. I couldn't even remember the last time my father admitted to noticing anything, let alone acknowledged what I'd felt my entire life. It wasn't an apology, not really. But it cracked something open, because it meant I hadn't imagined it. I hadn't been too sensitive. He'd seen it too, and he did nothing. I leaned back, the ceiling fan spinning lazily above me. My coffee had gone cold. My chest felt heavy, but not in the same way as before. The truth settled in, slow and sobering. This wasn't about one birthday party. It wasn't even about Celine being the golden child or Clarissa weaponizing guilt like a second language. This was about the system they built, a story I'd been cast in without consent. I was the villain in their narrative because it made them the heroes. I didn't reply to anyone's texts that morning. Not Clarissa, not Celine, not even Dad. Instead, I sat there, staring at the screen until the words blurred again, and decided, no more silence, no more pretending. They wanted me to play the part of the problem. Maybe it was time I showed them what the problem really looked like. I didn't know how deep the lies went, but I was about to find out. The message came 2 days later, on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, when I thought the storm had passed. I'd spent most of the day working from home, answering emails and pretending that what happened at the Monarch was behind me. The drizzle tapping against my window matched the rhythm of my thoughts. Quiet, relentless, hard to ignore. It wasn't until late afternoon, around 4 p.m., that my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar name lighting up the screen. Cassian Brooks. I hesitated before opening it. Cassian was Celine's boyfriend. We'd barely exchanged more than polite hellos over the years. He was part of her orbit, not mine. His message was short. Marlo, can we talk? Coffee? Tomorrow morning? I stared at the screen, suspicion curling in my stomach. Why would he want to talk to me? Still, curiosity won. The next morning, the clouds had cleared, but the air felt heavy. I made the drive back to Austin, a part of me wondering if I was being foolish, if this was another setup I hadn't seen coming. By 9 a.m., I was sitting at a corner table in a quiet coffee shop downtown, nursing a latte I didn't really want. Cassian walked in 5 minutes later, looking like he hadn't slept. His tie was crooked, dark circles smudged beneath his eyes. He scanned the room until he spotted me, then walked over. "Marlo," he greeted, voice stiff. "Cassian," I replied, motioning for him to sit. "Didn't expect to hear from you." He sat across from me, fiddling with his coffee cup like he didn't know where to begin. "I shouldn't be here," he said finally, "but after what I heard, I couldn't keep quiet." That got my attention. He glanced around, lowering his voice. The night of the party, before everyone arrived, I overheard Clarissa and Celine. My stomach tightened. Overheard what? Cassian exhaled, shoulders slumping. They were in the back lounge, laughing about how you'd react when you saw your table. I didn't move. I couldn't. They said, he swallowed, eyes meeting mine. They said you'd finally know your place when you were seated with the kids. And then Clarissa joked, "She'll never leave. She needs us more than we need her." His words cracked something open inside me, sharp and immediate. It hadn't been carelessness. It hadn't been an oversight. It had been cruelty, calculated, deliberate. For a moment, the sound of the coffee shop around me faded. All I could hear was that voice in my head whispering the same thing it always had. "You don't matter." I looked down at my hands, curling them into fists beneath the table. Cassian cleared his throat. "I thought maybe it was just a bad joke. But the way you left that night, I realized it wasn't the first time, was it?" I shook my head slowly, the weight of it pressing down on me. "No," I said quietly. "It's never just one night." Images flickered behind my eyes. Birthday parties where I wasn't mentioned. Holidays where I took the photos instead of being in them. Whispered comments about how I was too sensitive, too much, or worse. Invisible. Cassian's voice broke through the spiral. "I'm sorry," he said. "I should have said something sooner." I met his gaze then, something cold settling in my chest. "It's not your apology I need," I replied, "but thank you." He shifted uncomfortably. "I don't think they understand what they've done." A bitter smile touched my lips. "Oh, they understand. They've been doing it my entire life." For the first time in days, I felt something shift. Not sadness, not helplessness, resolve. I leaned back, my voice steady. "They think I won't do anything. They're wrong." Cassian nodded, like he understood more than he wanted to. I stood up, sliding my chair back quietly. As I grabbed my coat, I glanced at him one last time. "Thanks for telling me," I said, "but this isn't your fight." When I stepped out into the bright morning light, the decision was already made. The game they'd been playing, I was finally ready to play back. I drove back to Houston after that meeting with Cassian, the weight in my chest heavier than when I'd arrived in Austin. But there was something else burning underneath it. Clarity. For the next 2 days, I kept my head down. I went to work, answered emails, paid bills. On the surface, I was living my usual life. But under all of that, something in me had shifted. On the third morning, as I was sorting through invoices in my home office, my phone rang. It wasn't a number I recognized, but the area code was Austin. For a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail. Then something told me to pick up. "Hello?" I answered, cautious. A calm, measured voice replied. "Marlo?" "This is Mirabelle Brooks." My heart stopped for a beat. Cassian's mother. She was the kind of woman who walked into a room and people stopped talking, not out of fear, but because they wanted to hear what she'd say. "We've never spoken directly," she continued, "but I think we should." I cleared my throat. "What is this about?" She paused, then said quietly, "I'd rather not discuss it over the phone." "Could you meet me? I believe we have something in common." An hour later, I was back on the road toward Austin, wondering how many more surprises this family could throw at me. We met at an upscale cafe tucked into a quiet corner of downtown. The kind of place where everyone wore pressed clothes and whispered politely. Mirabelle was already seated when I arrived, perfectly composed in a cream blazer, a porcelain cup of tea in front of her. She stood when I approached. "Marlo," she greeted, extending her hand. "Thank you for coming." I sat across from her, folding my hands on the table. "I won't waste your time," she began, sliding a manila folder across the table toward me. "I wanted you to see this before it becomes public knowledge." I glanced down at the folder, but didn't open it yet. "What is it?" Mirabelle's gaze didn't waver. "Documentation showing that Celine attempted to use the Brooks family name to secure a private business loan, without Cassian's knowledge or consent." Her voice remained steady, but I could hear the steel underneath. I opened the folder. Inside were copies of emails, loan applications, even a draft agreement where Celine listed herself as a family representative. It was all there: names, dates, signatures she wasn't authorized to use. I swallowed hard, each page heavier than the last. She was counting on Cassian's family money to back her new venture, Mirabelle said quietly, without ever asking. My fingers tightened around the edge of the folder. This is fraud," Mirabelle nodded once. "And manipulation, which, I believe, isn't new behavior in your family." I looked up at her, something icy settling behind my ribs. "You knew she was capable of this?" "I suspected," she said simply, "but what I heard after the party confirmed it." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The hum of the cafe felt far away, like background noise to something larger, uglier. When I finally spoke, my voice was quieter but sharper. "Why tell me?" Mirabelle folded her hands. "Because you're the only one who seems willing to see the truth." When I left the cafe 20 minutes later, the folder was in my bag and my phone was already in my hand. I didn't hesitate. By the time I reached my car, I had sent the message to Clarissa and Celine, both. "Why, if you keep trying to control me and hurt others, I won't stay quiet anymore." The response from Clarissa came within minutes. "Marlo, you're being dramatic. This is family business. You always blow things out of proportion." Celine, of course, said nothing. I sat there in my car, staring at the screen, feeling the heat rise behind my eyes. Not from hurt this time, but from anger. They weren't even surprised. They didn't deny it. They dismissed me like they always had. But this wasn't like before. Because now, I had proof. This wasn't about birthday parties or forgotten names and speeches anymore. This was about how far they were willing to go to keep me in my place, and how far I'd have to go to tear that place down. I took a breath, steadying myself, and typed one final message to Clarissa. "Keep pretending this is nothing. You're about to see exactly how much nothing looks like when it burns." I hit send. They thought I wouldn't fight back. They were about to see just how wrong they were. The message I sent to Clarissa burned in the back of my mind long after I hit send. For 2 days, the silence was deafening. No texts, no calls, no carefully worded apologies. Just quiet. Until the knock at my door. It was Thursday evening. I'd spent most of the day working from home, reviewing financial reports for a client, trying to pretend the storm wasn't circling closer. Around 7:30 p.m., I was just about to shut down my laptop when the pounding came, a sharp, impatient knock that rattled the door. I knew who it was before I even looked through the peephole. Celine. When I opened the door, she was standing there, arms crossed, eyes narrowed like I'd personally set her world on fire. "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice tight. I didn't bother to hide my sigh. "I guess." She brushed past me, walking into the living room like she owned the place. The second the door closed behind us, she spun to face me. "Are you seriously trying to ruin my life?" There it was. No hello, no explanation, straight to the accusation. I folded my arms. "You showed up uninvited to my home to ask me that?" She took a step forward. "You've been talking to Mirabelle, to Cassian, spreading lies." I shook my head, a dry laugh slipping out. "No lies, Celine, just facts, ones you worked really hard to bury." Her lips curled into something between a sneer and a smirk. "You're jealous. You always have been." "Jealous?" I repeated, incredulous. "Of what? The lies? The manipulation?" Celine rolled her eyes. "Oh, please. You've always needed someone to blame for why your life is so sad." That word snapped something in me. "Don't." I warned quietly. She ignored me. You couldn't stand that it was my night, that Mom loves me more. So now you're what? Playing detective? Digging up things that aren't your business? I took a slow breath, forcing myself to stay steady. Celine, it became my business when you dragged my name through the mud and laughed about it. When you sat back and let Mom treat me like a footnote for 30 years. Her jaw tightened. I stepped closer. You don't get to walk in here and pretend like I'm the one who started this. For a second, I saw something flicker behind her eyes. Uncertainty. But she buried it quickly. You need to drop this, Marlo, she snapped. You're about to tear this family apart. I met her glare, something cold settling in my chest. Maybe it needs to break, I said softly. Maybe that's the only way to rebuild it without all the rot. Celine scoffed. You're unbelievable. Without another word, she stormed toward the door, yanking it open. Before she left, she turned back one last time. You're gonna regret this. The door slammed behind her. I stood there for a long moment, heart pounding, not with fear, but with something sharper. Resolve. Later that night, around 10 p.m., I was on the couch with a book I wasn't reading when my phone pinged. An email. From Clarissa. Subject line, let's not do this. I clicked it open. Sweetheart, it began, I know you're upset, but this doesn't have to get ugly. You know how Celine is. She doesn't mean half the things she says. Don't let this tear our family apart. There it was again. That carefully polished, insincere tone. The fake concern. The manipulation. The email ended with, let's talk soon. I know you don't really mean to cause trouble. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I deleted the message without replying. I wasn't falling for it anymore. No more gaslighting. No more pretending this was normal. I closed my laptop and sat in the dark, the hum of the city outside my window like background noise to the decision already made inside me. If they wanted a fight, they were about to get one. The days after Celine showed up at my door passed like a blur of static. I went to work. I logged into meetings. I smiled politely at the neighbors in the hallway. But something in me had hardened. By the 6th day after the party, the war began. It started quietly. A co-worker in my office's break room gave me a strange look as I poured my coffee. Someone I barely spoke to, a woman named Ashley, said under her breath, Hey, hope you're doing okay? Heard things have been rough at home. I frowned, forcing a polite smile. I'm fine, thanks. That was the first crack. By lunchtime, 3 more colleagues had awkwardly mentioned family drama I hadn't told them about. At first, I thought it was coincidence. Small-town gossip. Maybe someone saw Celine outside my apartment the other night. But when I checked my phone at 3 p.m., it was undeniable. Group chat messages, extended family threads, even a few DMs on Facebook, all hinting at the same thing. Is everything okay, Marlo? Your mom mentioned you've been struggling. I hope you're getting help. Clarissa said you've been lashing out a lot lately. Celine said you left her party in tears. Wish you'd just talk to her. My hands tightened around the phone as I scrolled, the words blurring together in one sickening thread. They were painting me unstable, mentally fragile, bitter, the unstable daughter causing family chaos. I set the phone down, breath shallow. They weren't just fighting back. They were trying to discredit me. Clarissa and Celine had done this before, in smaller ways. Little comments about how I overreacted, how I was too emotional. But now it was public. They were playing dirty. By evening, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Aunt Carol, who I hadn't spoken to in 2 years, texted, I know you're hurting, honey. Don't burn bridges. One of my closest friends called, voice hesitant. Your mom reached out to me, said you're spiraling. The word echoed in my head like a slap. I stood at my kitchen window, staring out at the Houston skyline, fury pulsing behind my ribs. This was how they'd always won. Not by fighting fair, but by convincing everyone else I was the problem. And for most of my life, I'd let them. Not this time. I grabbed my phone and scrolled back through my messages until I found Cassian's name. My thumb hovered for a moment before I typed, You deserve to know the truth. before you marry into this. I attached every document Mirabelle had given me, the emails, the fake loan agreements, the messages Clarissa and Selene had sent over the years. Then I added one more message. They've spent their whole lives making me the villain, but you should know who's really pulling the strings. I hit send. It was almost midnight when I shut my laptop, the last remnants of my workday forgotten. The smear campaign had made one thing clear. There was no going back. I wasn't the family problem. I was the only one who'd finally stopped pretending. As I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the silence felt heavier than ever, but it wasn't suffocating. It was the calm before the storm. They tried to silence me. Instead, I just handed them the match. The fallout came faster than I expected. By the next morning, my phone buzzed with a single message from Cassian. "We need to talk." That was it. No hello, no pleasantries. The same Cassian who, a week ago, had barely spoken to me beyond polite nods, now wanted to talk. I replied with a simple, "Tell me when and where." That afternoon, I drove back to Austin. The clouds hanging low over the city felt like a weight pressing against my chest. When I arrived at Cassian's house, he was already waiting by the front door, hands shoved in his pockets, jaw tight. He didn't invite me inside. Instead, he spoke right there on the porch. "I ended it," he said without preamble, "with Selene." I blinked, trying to process. He went on. "After everything you sent me, the financial documents, the messages, the lies, I couldn't ignore it anymore." There was no triumph in his voice, just exhaustion. "My family knows," he added. "The investors pulled out of her startup this morning. The wedding's off." A beat of silence stretched between us. "She'll blame you," I said quietly. Cassian gave a bitter smile. "She already does." I nodded, my throat tight. "Thank you for listening," I said. He shook his head. "Thank you for telling me." When I drove back to Houston that evening, the sun had dipped low, casting long shadows across the freeway. For a moment, I felt lighter. But I knew better than to believe the storm was over. By the time I got home, there was an email waiting for me. Subject line, "Can we talk?" It was from Clarissa. My stomach twisted as I opened it. "Marlo," it began, "I think we've all let things get out of hand. I'd love to sit down over dinner and talk this through. This family doesn't need more division. Celine's hurting. You don't need to destroy her future over old wounds." She signed it. "Love, Mom." For a long time, I stared at the screen, rereading the words. It was everything I'd heard my whole life, wrapped in sweet concern and hidden threats. Don't ruin the family. Don't hold grudges. Don't make this about you. I closed the email without replying. For years, I'd bent myself backward to be the daughter they wanted. I'd swallowed every slight, ignored every wound. All for what? So they could rewrite the story and make me the villain? Not anymore. That night, after a long shower and a glass of wine, I sat at my kitchen table and opened my laptop. I typed a reply to Clarissa's email. No. That was it. No explanation, no apology, no more pretending. I hit send. Then I blocked her number. The next few days passed in eerie quiet. The family group chat went silent. Celine's social media accounts disappeared one by one. Friends who used to comment under every post fell off the radar. The whispers in the background were still there, of course. Co-workers, distant cousins, people who had opinions about family drama that wasn't theirs. But I stopped listening. I'd spent my whole life trying to fix something that wasn't broken by me. And now, for the first time, I didn't care how the story sounded to anyone else. Late one evening, as I sat on my balcony watching the Houston skyline glow against the night, my phone buzzed with one last message from an old family friend. "I don't know what's happening, but I hope you're okay." I smiled faintly, setting the phone down. I was okay. For the first time in my life, I chose myself, and there was no turning back. The days after everything collapsed stretched out like empty pages. It had been 2 weeks since Cassian called off the wedding, 2 weeks since Celine disappeared from every social platform she once dominated. 2 weeks since Clarissa's last attempt to pull me back in had failed. And the silence was deafening. The family group chat remained a graveyard. No memes, no family updates, no half-hearted birthday wishes. For years, I'd craved that chat's attention. I used to check it obsessively, hoping to see my name, to be included in the jokes, the photos, the plans. Now, it sat there, unread, irrelevant. In a way, it felt like mourning something that had died long ago. I didn't miss them. I missed who I thought they could be. One quiet Tuesday morning, as I was cleaning out my inbox, a new email appeared. From Clarissa, no subject line. I hesitated for a long moment before opening it. There was no long apology, no dramatic plea. Just one sentence. I hope you find what you're looking for. I stared at it, waiting to feel something, anger, grief, maybe even guilt, but I felt nothing at all. I clicked delete without replying. Later that afternoon, I left my apartment and walked down to the city park. It was one of those crisp spring days in Houston where the air felt lighter, almost forgiving. Kids laughed near the playground. Dog owners chatted over coffee cups. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel like an outsider watching life happen without me. I sat on a bench under a wide oak tree, letting the breeze wash over me. My phone vibrated in my pocket, but I ignored it. For once, no message mattered more than this moment. I thought about everything that had happened. The birthday party, the insults, the lies, the manipulation. For so long, I'd believed that if I just worked harder, stayed quieter, made myself smaller, they'd let me belong. But that night, when I walked away from Celine's birthday party, I hadn't lost anything. I'd started finding myself. And it wasn't perfect. The wounds were still there, still tender beneath the surface. But they no longer controlled me. The park around me buzzed with life. A little girl zipped past on a scooter, her parents cheering her on. For a brief second, I thought about my own childhood. The birthdays without cake, the empty chairs, the long nights wondering what I'd done wrong. And then I let it go. Because I knew now, closure doesn't come from the people who hurt you. It comes when you stop waiting for them to fix what they broke and start building something better for yourself. Before I stood up to leave, I pulled out my phone one last time and typed a message in my notes. Not to send to anyone, just to remind myself. You don't have to sit at a table where you're not welcome. You can always build your own. As I walked away from the park, the Houston skyline glittering ahead, I smiled. I left that night thinking I'd lost a family. But what I really did was find myself. And before I end this story, let me leave you with something I wish someone had told me a long time ago. Sometimes the people who should love you the most are the ones who hurt you the deepest. Not because you're unworthy, but because they're too broken to see you clearly. And you will waste years, maybe decades, trying to earn a seat at a table that was never built for you. But here's the truth I learned the hard way. You don't need anyone's permission to choose peace. You don't owe anyone your silence in exchange for their approval. Walking away isn't weakness, it's freedom. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, or like no matter how hard you try, you're always the problem. This story was for you. Because you're not the problem. You're the one finally brave enough to stop pretending everything's okay. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had to walk away from people you thought you couldn't live without, just to finally breathe again? Drop a 1 in the comments if this story hit home for you. Or tell me, where are you watching from? Your stories, your struggles, your victories matter here. And hey, if this video made you feel seen, if it gave you even a sliver of strength, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. There are more stories like this one waiting for you. Thank you for being here. And remember, you are never too old, too broken, or too late to start writing your own story.
He slapped me hard, the sound echoing in the room. Then he grabbed my hair and slammed my head against the wall. The pain spread through me, but what hurt more was his betrayal. I had just given birth to our daughter, and instead of being happy, his face was filled with anger. "I wanted a son," he hissed, and those words stung more than the slap. The man who once loved me now looked at me with rage. I couldn't understand how things had gotten so bad. Just hours earlier, I held our daughter, Angela, for the first time. Her tiny face was full of innocence and hope. I thought she would bring us closer, make us a stronger family. But Raymond barely even looked at her. His first words were, "You failed me, Patricia." It was as if he couldn't even stand the sight of her, because she wasn't a boy. Tears filled my eyes, not because of the pain from his slap, but because my heart was breaking. The man I loved, the father of my child, had turned into someone I didn't recognize. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. All I could think about was how fast everything had fallen apart. My name is Patricia, and this is the story of how my life was torn apart, and how I found the strength to rebuild it. It's a story of betrayal, heartbreak, and, in the end, hope. It all began in Louisville, back in high school, when I first met Raymond Timothy. Raymond was quiet, always sitting in the library working on his computer. He was different from the other boys, who cared more about sports or parties. Something about him caught my attention. He seemed so focused, so serious. I remember watching him from across the room, wondering what he was thinking as he typed away. After weeks of working up the courage, I finally went up to him. "Hey, Raymond, do you have a minute?" I asked, my heart pounding so loud I thought he could hear it. I was sure he could hear my heart pounding. He looked up from his computer, surprised. His eyes narrowed for a moment in confusion, then softened. "Oh, sure," he said, his voice quiet but friendly. From that moment, we were inseparable. Raymond became my high school sweetheart, the boy who made me believe in forever. We spent countless hours together, talking about everything and nothing. We had big dreams. He wanted to work in tech, and I wanted to build a career in marketing. We made plans, whispered promises under the stars, and shared our first kiss at prom. It felt like a fairy tale, like nothing could ever tear us apart. By the time we graduated, I was sure we were meant to be together. We got married when I was 24, filled with hope and excitement. I had just started my job as a marketing consultant, and Raymond was working as an IT technician. Life seemed perfect, especially when we found out I was pregnant. I believed our love could handle anything. But I was wrong. The early days of motherhood felt magical. I remember holding Angela in my arms, listening to her tiny breaths as she slept. I would watch Raymond holding her too, though not as much as I had hoped. The joy I saw on his face the first time he held her quickly faded. Soon, he grew distant, and with every passing day, the space between us seemed to grow larger. Everything changed after Angela was born. Raymond started coming home late from work, and sometimes he wouldn't come home at all. I would sit on the couch, heart racing, waiting to hear the front door creak open. I hoped he would give me some kind of explanation to calm the worry twisting in my stomach. "Where have you been?" I would ask, trying to keep my voice steady, not wanting to sound accusing. But deep down, I was scared of what the truth might be. "Just work, Patricia," he would say, brushing past me without even looking me in the eye. "You know how it is." But I didn't know. All I knew was that things were falling apart. I felt like I was losing him, and every day, the man I had fallen in love with seemed further out of reach. The breaking point came one evening during another argument. The house was silent except for the ticking clock, a reminder of how late it was. I had stayed up waiting for him again. When Raymond finally came through the door, it was clear something was wrong. He looked tense and avoided meeting my eyes. "Where have you been?" I asked again. "This isn't just about work, Raymond. What's going on?" My frustration was building, and I couldn't keep it inside any longer. I was tired, emotionally and physically, and I couldn't handle the growing distance between us anymore. Then Raymond snapped at me, his voice harsh and cutting. "I'm doing my best. Maybe if you weren't so needy all the time, I wouldn't have to stay out," he said. His words felt like a slap in the face, but what happened next was even worse. In a flash of anger, Raymond lunged at me. His hands grabbed my neck, and he pushed me down onto the floor with such force that I couldn't breathe for a moment. I lay there, stunned, staring up at him in disbelief. This was the man I married, the man I built a life with, but now he felt like a complete stranger. Time seemed to stop. The only thing I could hear was the sound of my heartbeat pounding in my ears. He didn't just hurt me physically, it felt like he broke my spirit, crushing any hope I had that things could ever go back to the way they were. I stayed on the floor, frozen, as he stormed out of the house. He didn't come back for days. I didn't call him. I didn't know what to say or how to even process what had happened. But deep down, I knew things would never be the same. Then came the betrayal that shattered the last bit of hope I had. Weeks had passed since that night, and Raymond's absence had become a constant ache. I tried to hold myself together for Angela, but the loneliness ate away at me, leaving me feeling lost and empty. One evening, as I scrolled through my phone trying to escape the silence in the house, I saw something that made my heart stop. It was a photo of Raymond, smiling and carefree. But he wasn't alone. Standing next to him, laughing on a beach, was Maria, my younger sister. At first, I thought it must be a mistake, maybe an old photo from before things fell apart. But as I looked through more pictures, the truth became clear. There they were, photo after photo, looking like a happy couple. My stomach turned as I realized what had been happening right in front of me. Maria, my sister, the one I trusted, the one who was supposed to have my back, was part of this nightmare. I felt like I couldn't trust anyone anymore. Maria had betrayed me in the worst way. I stared at my phone, feeling numb. How long had this been going on? Were they seeing each other while Raymond and I were still trying to fix our marriage? How could they do this to me and to Angela? That night, my hands shook as I dialed my parents. When my mom answered, her voice was warm and comforting, but I couldn't hold back my tears. "Mom," I sobbed. "Maria, she's with Raymond. They've been seeing each other." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When my mom finally spoke, her voice was full of shock and sadness. "Patricia, I don't know what to say. I'm so sorry. We'll help you however we can." But no words could take away the pain of that betrayal. It felt like my whole world had crumbled. I had lost my husband and my sister all at once. It was a double betrayal, and it left me feeling more alone than ever. The days that followed were a blur of heartbreak and disbelief. I tried to focus on Angela, giving her the love and care she needed, but it was hard. Every time I thought about what Raymond and Maria had done, the anger and hurt would rise again, threatening to drown me. Then, as if things couldn't get worse, I found out they had been taking money from our joint bank account. My money. They were using it to fund their new, fancy lifestyle, leaving me with unpaid bills and an empty account. They hadn't just broken my trust, they had taken everything. My family, my financial security, my hope. One of my darkest days became a turning point when a familiar face walked through my door. It was Mr. Timothy, Raymond's father. He had always been kind to me, treating me like the daughter he never had. Now, as he sat beside me, the sadness in his eyes reflected my own. "I'm so sorry for what Raymond has done, Patricia," he said softly, his voice full of regret. "I had no idea things had gotten this bad. I want to help you." He handed me a document. "I set aside $400,000 for Angela's future. Please take it." Tears filled my eyes, but I shook my head. "I can't accept charity," I said, even though I felt broken inside. "I need to stand on my own," I said. "This isn't charity," Mr. Timothy insisted. "It's for Angela, and I want to help you rebuild. You're strong, Patricia, stronger than you realize. Let's turn this around. You've always had a talent for design. Why not open your own home decor boutique? Use this money to create something for yourself and for Angela. You deserve that." His words sparked something inside me, something I thought was lost. For so long, I had felt powerless, trapped in the mess that Raymond and Maria had caused. But now, I could see a way out, a chance to start over and take back control of my life. With Mr. Timothy's encouragement, I decided to take a leap of faith. The idea of starting a home decor boutique gave me hope, something positive to focus on. I used the money to rent a small storefront in a busy part of Louisville. Over the next few months, I poured all my energy into making my dream a reality. I obsessed over every detail, the arrangement of furniture, the colors on the walls, and the lighting that would make the space warm and welcoming. I wanted the boutique to feel like a place of beauty and comfort, reflecting the life I was trying to rebuild for Angela and myself. I worked long hours, sometimes staying up late after putting Angela to bed. It was exhausting, but for the first time in months, I felt alive again. Each sketch, each display I arranged, felt like a small piece of my life coming back together. This boutique was more than just a business. It was my way of creating a future, one that didn't include Raymond or Maria. The day of the grand opening arrived, and I stood outside the shop, my heart pounding with excitement and nerves. The space looked perfect, filled with elegant furniture, hand-picked home decor, and carefully arranged displays. I had put everything I had into this dream, and now it was time to see if it would succeed. Mr. Timothy stood beside me, his support a constant source of strength. He had been there every step of the way, offering advice, encouragement, and even helping with the heavy lifting when things got tough. "You've done it, Patricia," he said, pride in his voice. "This place is going to thrive." "Thank you," I said, feeling a warmth spread through me. I knew I couldn't have done it without him. He had believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. As the doors opened, customers started to come in, admiring the displays and browsing through the items. It was the start of something new, something that felt like hope and a fresh beginning. I greeted every customer with a smile, sharing my love for design and helping them find the perfect pieces for their homes. The excitement in the shop was contagious, and for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. Graceful Designs was off to a great start, and I could finally see a future where I didn't have to rely on anyone but myself. But just as I was beginning to heal, the past came crashing back. It started with messages from Maria. She mocked and taunted me, as if she couldn't stand the idea of me moving on without them. She sent pictures of her and Raymond at exotic locations, on beaches, at luxury resorts, and in fancy restaurants. Each message felt like a stab to my heart, reopening old wounds that had barely begun to heal. In one message, she wrote, "You're really going to let that little shop keep you busy? You should come visit us. Life is amazing here." I tried to ignore her, but the anger and pain boiled inside me. How could she be so cruel? She had already taken everything, my husband, my money, my trust, and now she couldn't even let me have this one thing, the new life I was building for Angela and me. One evening, after another hurtful message from Maria, I couldn't hold it in any longer. I broke down and called Mr. Timothy. My voice shook as I tried to explain how much this was hurting me. "I thought I was moving on," I said through tears. "But every time Maria contacts me, it's like I'm being pulled back into the same nightmare. I don't know how to make it stop." Mr. Timothy listened patiently, his calm voice grounding me. "Patricia," he said gently, "you've come so far. Don't let them keep this power over you. It's time to take control." His words struck a chord. He was right. I had worked too hard to let Maria and Raymond ruin what I was building. I couldn't let them control my emotions anymore. But I needed closure. I needed to confront them once and for all. Mr. Timothy had an idea. "What if we use their greed against them?" he suggested. "They've already shown you what they care about most, money. We can spread a rumor that you're about to receive a big inheritance. It would bring them back here, and then you can confront them on your terms." At first, the idea seemed too wild, but the more I thought about it, the more sense it made. Greed had always been their weakness. If I could use that to draw them back, I might finally get the closure I needed. We went ahead with the plan, spreading a rumor through mutual acquaintances about a large inheritance I was supposed to receive. It was risky, but I felt ready to face them and take back my power. The rumor about the inheritance spread quickly, and we knew it wouldn't take long for Raymond and Maria to hear about it. We were right. Within weeks, they were back in Louisville, drawn by the promise of easy money. They walked into Graceful Designs with smug looks on their faces, trying to hide their greed behind fake smiles. It felt strange seeing them standing there together, Raymond, the man I once loved, and Maria, the sister who had betrayed me. They looked like they had the perfect life, but I could see the cracks. There was desperation in their eyes, no matter how hard they tried to hide it. "Patricia," Raymond said casually, as if nothing had happened. "It's been a while. We heard about this big inheritance. Care to share the details?" I forced a smile, keeping calm. "Actually," I said, my voice steady, "you'll find out soon enough." We sat down at a small table in the boutique. The air was tense. They were eager, hungry for the money they thought was coming. But they didn't realize this wasn't about them. This was about me, taking back control of my life. As I sat across from them, I could feel the weight of everything they had done. The lies, the betrayal, the pain they caused. But I stayed composed. This was my moment, and I wasn't going to let them see me break. "I know what you've both done," I said, my voice calm but firm. "You stole from me. You lied. You betrayed me. And now you think you can just walk back into my life and take more?" Raymond shifted in his seat, his confidence starting to crack. "Patricia, it's not like that." "Oh, it's exactly like that." I cut him off, locking eyes with him. "But I'm not the woman you left behind. I've built a life for myself, and I'm doing just fine. And as for the inheritance you're so eager to get your hands on, it's not going to either of you." Maria's face twisted in anger. "You're making a mistake, Patricia," she snapped, her voice shaking. "We're family." I let out a bitter laugh. "Family doesn't betray each other, Maria. You lost that title the moment you decided to steal from me." Just then, the door to the boutique opened, and Mr. Timothy walked in. His calm, steady presence made the room feel heavier. He approached the table and sat down beside me, his gaze fixed on Raymond and Maria. "The inheritance," Mr. Timothy said, his voice strong and steady, "is going to Angela. Neither of you are entitled to a single penny." The shock on their faces was priceless. They hadn't expected this, and it was clear they didn't know what to say. For the first time, I felt like I had the upper hand. I could see their world falling apart as they realized they had been outsmarted. For the first time, I saw fear in their eyes, the fear of losing everything they had so confidently assumed would be theirs. Raymond opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. His usual smugness was gone, replaced by a desperation I had never seen before. Maria, too, was silent, her earlier boldness crumbling as the truth sank in. As they stormed out of the boutique, defeated, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. I had taken back my power, and it was an incredible feeling. I had reclaimed control of my life and my future, and there was nothing they could do to change that. In the weeks that followed, Graceful Designs continued to thrive. The boutique became a favorite spot in the community, with customers coming back week after week to explore the collections I had worked so hard to create. Each day, I grew more confident in myself and the new life I was building for Angela and me. But even with the boutique's success, the memories of Raymond and Maria still lingered. I couldn't forget how they had torn my life apart. I knew I wouldn't feel true closure until they faced the consequences of their actions. Then one morning I received a notice from the court. It was time for the legal case against Raymond to move forward. Not only had he betrayed me financially, but he had also physically hurt me. Now, justice was finally within reach. The courtroom was tense as Raymond stood before the judge. I sat quietly in the gallery, my hands clasped tightly in my lap, listening as the charges were read: domestic violence and theft. The weight of what he had done was clear for everyone to see. There was no escaping the truth now. When it was my turn to testify, I spoke about the night he hurt me. I described the slap, how he slammed my head against the wall, and the pain it caused, not just physically but emotionally. The courtroom went silent as I spoke. It was hard to relive those moments, to talk about the betrayal and violence that had nearly destroyed me. But I knew it was something I had to do. It was necessary for my healing and for justice. I needed to make sure Raymond was held responsible for the pain he caused, not just to me, but to our daughter, too. The judge listened carefully to both sides, and after what felt like forever, the sentence was finally announced. Raymond was sentenced to 6 years in prison for physical assault and domestic violence. His face stayed emotionless as the verdict was read, but I felt a huge weight lift off my shoulders. This was justice. This was the closure I had been waiting for. But that wasn't all. In addition to the prison sentence, Raymond was ordered to pay a $100,000 fine for the pain and suffering he caused. While it was a small price compared to the damage he had done, it was a reminder that actions have consequences. The court also ruled that he must repay the money he stole from our joint account, ensuring Angela's future would be secure. When the gavel struck, marking the end of the trial, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. Raymond was finally being held accountable, both physically and financially. As he was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs, I felt like I could breathe again. I had won. I had taken back control of my life, and there was nothing Raymond or Maria could do to change that. In the weeks that followed, Graceful Designs continued to thrive. The boutique became more than just a business. It was a symbol of my strength and everything I had overcome. Customers loved the shop, and soon I started expanding. I brought in exclusive designs and even began hosting workshops on interior decorating. But it wasn't just the success of the boutique that made me feel whole again. It was the small moments, watching Angela take her first steps, hearing her laugh as we played in the park, and knowing that I had created a life for us free from Raymond and Maria's toxic influence. Mr. Timothy continued to be a steady presence in our lives, always offering support and guidance when I needed it. He had been there from the start, helping me rebuild when everything fell apart, and I knew I could always count on him. As time went on, the memories of Raymond and Maria faded into the background. They were replaced by a sense of peace and fulfillment. I no longer felt the need to look over my shoulder, wondering if they would try to come back into my life. They were gone, and I was free. One evening, as I sat with Angela, watching her play and laugh, I realized how far I had come. My life was no longer defined by pain or betrayal, but by hope, strength, and a future filled with love and possibility. I stood in the boutique, watching the sunset over Louisville, and thought about how far I had come. I wasn't the same woman who had been shattered by betrayal and heartbreak. I had rebuilt my life from scratch, and I was stronger than ever. As I closed the shop and locked the door for the night, I felt a deep sense of peace. This was just the beginning. I had taken back my life, my happiness, and my future. Whatever challenges came my way, I knew I was ready to face them with strength and courage. Thank you for listening to Patricia's journey of betrayal, strength, and justice. If her story inspired you, please hit the like button and share your thoughts in the comments. For more stories of resilience and empowerment, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Your support helps us continue to share powerful stories like this one. Stay tuned, and we'll see you in the next video. The day everything changed. I never imagined my sister's wedding would be the moment my entire world shifted. Looking back, the warning signs were there. I just hadn't paid attention. The first red flag? My invitation arrived only 4 days before the ceremony. The second? The words kitchen staff entrance only written in elegant gold script, with a hastily drawn arrow pointing to the back of the venue. Rachel, my older sister, had always been the golden child. While I dedicated my life to teaching underprivileged children, she climbed the corporate ladder with designer heels and a perfect manicure. Our parents never let me forget the difference between us. "Why can't you be more like your sisters?" Mom would sigh, eyeing my simple clothes and practical shoes with disappointment. Look at her, engaged to Scott Ritter, CEO of Ritter Industries. And what do you have to show for yourself? What they didn't understand was that I had plenty to show, just not in ways they valued. My small apartment wasn't impressive, but the joy on my students' faces when they finally understood a difficult lesson was worth more than any penthouse suite. Still, Rachel was my sister. No matter how distant she had grown since getting engaged to Scott, I told myself I had to be there. I put on my best dress, not designer, but elegant in its simplicity, and drove my aging Honda Civic to the Grand Plaza Hotel. At the main entrance, a security guard glanced at my invitation and pointed toward the back. "Service entrance only," he said curtly. I swallowed my pride and walked around the building, stepping through the bustling kitchen, dodging chefs and waiters rushing to prepare what was clearly an extravagant reception. The scent of fresh bread and seared steak filled the air, but all I could taste was the bitterness in my throat. A hostess intercepted me and led me to a small, nearly hidden table behind a massive pillar, far from the grand hall where the real celebration was taking place. Rachel's instructions were very clear, she said, shifting uncomfortably. Family members who might embarrass the couple should be kept out of sight. My hands trembled as I sat down, staring at the glittering chandeliers just out of reach. I had never felt more invisible. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't just being excluded from the wedding. I was being erased. And I wasn't sure I could ever forgive her for it. I sat down, my fingers brushing against the tablecloth, thin, scratchy, and nothing like the fine linens covering the tables in the main hall. In front of me, a cheap plastic fork and knife rested on a flimsy napkin, starkly different from the gleaming silverware and fine china set before the other guests. My stomach tightened as I noticed a small folded note beside my plate. My sister's elegant handwriting curled across the paper in smooth, practiced strokes. Know your place, little sister. Don't ruin this for me. The words stung more than I wanted to admit. My first instinct was to stand up, to leave, and never look back. I should have. I should have walked right out of that grand hotel and let Rachel have her perfect, polished wedding without me. But I stayed. Maybe it was stubbornness. The same stubbornness that made me choose teaching over the high-powered career my parents had pushed for. The same determination that made me believe I could carve my own path in a world that constantly reminded me I didn't quite fit. So I sat in my hidden corner, watching from the shadows as my sister floated down the aisle. The ceremony was breathtaking, of course. Rachel was stunning in a gown that likely cost more than my yearly salary, her veil catching the soft glow of the chandeliers. She moved with the grace of someone who had spent her entire life preparing for this moment, for this fairy tale ending. And waiting at the altar was Scott Ritter. Tall, distinguished, impeccably dressed in a custom tuxedo. He was handsome in that effortless, magazine cover way, the kind of man my mother would call a catch. The kind of man who belonged in my sister's world of wealth and influence. But something was wrong. As Rachel approached, his expression remained carefully composed, but his eyes held an emotion I couldn't quite place. He looked tense, almost uneasy. Then his gaze shifted, and he saw me. For a moment, the crowded room faded. The soft music, the whispered admiration, the quiet sniffles of teary-eyed guests, none of it existed. Just me. And him. Scott Ritter, CEO of Ritter Industries, locked eyes with me across the room. And then, in a moment so small yet so shocking, everything changed. He dropped his wedding ring. The golden band slipped from his fingers, hitting the marble floor with a sharp ping, before rolling, coming to a stop right at my feet. I froze. Slowly, I bent down to pick it up. And as my fingers closed around the cool metal, memories I had long buried came rushing back. 17 years ago. A tiny coffee shop in New York. I was 19, juggling college classes and late-night shifts, dreaming of the day I would have my own classroom. He was 23, a regular customer who always ordered the same thing, black coffee, no sugar. But back then, he wasn't Scott Ritter, CEO. He was just Scott. A graduate student with big dreams and even bigger ideals. He wanted to change the world through ethical business practices. I wanted to teach. We spent 7 beautiful months together, lost in endless conversations about how we could combine our passions. Maybe we'd start a foundation for education. Maybe we'd travel. Maybe we'd make a difference together. And then he vanished. No explanation. No goodbye. Just gone. Now, 17 years later, Scott stood at the altar, about to marry my sister. And as I stared down at the wedding ring in my hand, I knew. He remembered, too. I had searched for him. For weeks, months, until I finally had to accept the truth. It was as if he had never existed. No phone calls, no messages, not even a trace of his name, anywhere. And then, a year later, I saw his face again. There he was, staring back at me from the glossy pages of a business magazine. Scott Ritter, heir to Ritter Industries, engaged to a wealthy socialite. The words blurred as my heart shattered all over again. Now, standing in my sister's grand wedding hall, that same man, once my Scott, was looking at me like he'd seen a ghost. The golden wedding band lay cold in my palm, the weight of the past pressing down on me. "Scott," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the stunned silence. I held out the ring. The color drained from his face. Rachel, ever poised, arched one of her perfectly sculpted eyebrows. Confusion flickered across her features before twisting into irritation. "Scott, darling, do you know my pathetic little sister?" she asked, her voice dripping with disdain. But Scott wasn't looking at her. His gaze had fallen to my left hand, to the delicate silver ring I still wore. The same one he had given me 17 years ago in a tiny coffee shop in New York. The one engraved with the words, "To my Rebecca, who taught me what really matters." A sharp breath left his lips. "Rebecca," he murmured, and in that single word, I heard everything. Regret, sorrow, longing. 17 years of silence broken in an instant. Rachel's expression hardened. Her voice sharpened like the edge of a blade. "Scott, what is going on?" Before he could answer, a figure stirred from the front row. A distinguished older man rose to his feet, his presence commanding attention. Aaron Ritter Sr., the founder of Ritter Industries. His face was thunderous as he stepped toward the altar, his voice slicing through the air. "Son," he said, his tone low but powerful, "please tell me this isn't the same Rebecca?" The words hung over the room like a storm ready to break. The same Rebecca? Confusion twisted in my chest. What was he talking about? Scott squared his shoulders. And for a moment, I saw a glimpse of the man I once knew, the idealist, the dreamer, the Scott who had wanted to change the world. He lifted his chin and looked his father in the eye. "Yes, father," he said, his voice steady. "This is Rebecca. The woman you paid $10 million to disappear 17 years ago." Silence shattered. Gasps rippled through the room. Guests whispered in hushed, urgent tones. Some reached for their phones, recording the unfolding disaster. Rachel's perfect wedding was crumbling before her eyes. My sister's face turned an alarming shade of red, a color that clashed horribly with her pristine white gown. $10 million? The air seemed to vanish from my lungs. My knees felt weak as I turned to Scott, searching his face for the truth. And in his eyes, I saw it. 17 years ago, I hadn't been abandoned. I hadn't been forgotten. I had been erased. I rose slowly, my legs unsteady, my teacher's salary feeling like a fragile thread in a room woven with wealth and deception. "You paid me to disappear?" My voice was barely above a whisper, but the weight of my words silenced the room. Aaron Ritter Sr. straightened his already perfect tie, his expression unreadable. "I paid your mother," he corrected, his voice smooth but cold. "She assured me you'd never contact Scott again. She said you agreed it was for the best." The air left my lungs. My mother. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity, her sudden insistence that I transfer universities that year, the mysterious deposit in my college fund, her constant reminders that Scott was out of my league. I turned to face her. She was shrinking into her chair, her carefully polished image cracking at the edges. "You knew," I said, my voice shaking. "You took money to separate us." She lifted her chin, her designer dress rustling as she stood. "It was for your own good," she said sharply. "Look at you, just a teacher living in a tiny apartment. Scott needed someone who understood his world. Rachel was perfect for him." "Perfect?" Scott let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. "Perfect for the company image, you mean? Just like that socialite you tried to set me up with after Rebecca left. Did you tell Rachel about that too, father? How you've been controlling my relationships for 17 years. Rachel, who had been silent through the unraveling disaster, finally snapped out of her daze. "Scott, darling," she purred, her voice laced with desperation. "Surely, you're not comparing my worthless sister to me? I mean, look at her dress. It's not even designer.
Scott turned to me.
His expression softened, his voice quieter but firm.
No, he said.
It's handmade. A hush fell over the room. Rebecca always said the most valuable things are made with love, not money. My throat tightened. He remembered. Rachel scoffed, flipping her hair over her shoulder. This is ridiculous. But Scott wasn't finished. He turned back to his father, his voice dropping into something cold and controlled. You have responsibilities, Aaron Ritter Sr. warned. The merger with Rachel's father's company. Scott cut him off. Is that what this wedding was really about, father? Another business deal? Rachel paled. What do you mean, a business deal? She demanded, her voice rising. Scott turned to her, his face unreadable. Your father's company is failing, he said simply. This marriage was meant to save it. That's why he pushed so hard for you to date me, isn't it? A strangled sound escaped Rachel's throat. Her father shot up from his seat, his face red with anger. Now see here. But Scott wasn't done. With calm precision, he reached into his tuxedo jacket and pulled out a small USB drive, holding it up between 3 fingers. This, he said, voice steady, proves everything. And in that moment, I knew. Rachel's wedding was over. But our story? It was just beginning. Scott took a step forward, his voice strong and unwavering. I found some interesting documents last week, father. About what really happened 17 years ago. About the real reason you wanted Rebecca gone. Aaron Ritter Sr. turned pale. His carefully composed mask cracked, and for the first time that evening, genuine fear flickered in his eyes. Scott, this isn't the time. No, Scott interrupted, his voice cutting through the hushed room. This is exactly the time. He turned to the stunned guests, his words carrying across the silent hall. Rebecca wasn't just my girlfriend back then. She was also volunteering at a youth center in South New York. A youth center that was about to be demolished to make room for one of our developments, a project that would have displaced hundreds of families. I felt the weight of the past pressing down on me, memories surfacing like ghosts from the shadows. I remembered that fight, the protests, the petitions, the late nights spent organizing families, helping them stand up against the powerful corporation that wanted to push them out. And I remembered Scott by my side, listening, supporting, even suggesting alternative locations for the project. Back then, I had thought he believed in the fight, that he believed in me. Rebecca was leading the charge, Scott continued, his eyes locked onto his father. She was good at it, too. Too good. The media was starting to pay attention. If that development had failed, it would have cost the company millions. But more than that, it would have proven that Ritter Industries could be beaten. The room was deathly quiet. That's why she had to go, isn't it, father? Aaron Ritter Sr. didn't respond. He simply sank into his chair, looking smaller than I had ever seen him. Scott exhaled, his voice cold as ice. So you paid her mother to make her disappear? A murmur rippled through the crowd. All eyes turned toward my mother, who was clutching her clutch bag so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Scott shook his head, disbelief and fury battling in his expression. You destroyed evidence of our relationship. You even donated to her new university to ensure she'd be accepted for a transfer. Everything, perfectly arranged. His father finally spoke, but his voice was weak. I did what was necessary for the company. Scott let out a bitter laugh. The company? Then he turned to the guests, his next words sending a fresh wave of shock through the room. The company that is now mine. Gasps erupted. Aaron Ritter Sr. sat up straighter, his shock unmistakable. Oh yes, Scott continued, his voice dripping with irony. As of last week, I'm the majority shareholder. Father signed over control as an early wedding gift. He let the word settle, then let out a quiet chuckle. Ironic, isn't it? A sharp gasp broke through the noise. Rachel. Scott, darling, you can't be serious, she squeaked, her perfectly manicured nails digging into his arm. We're supposed to be married. We're supposed to run this company together. Scott gently removed her hand from his sleeve, as if shaking off an afterthought. Then he walked toward me, ignoring the murmurs, ignoring my mother's horrified expression. ignoring the storm unraveling around us. I held my breath. "Rebecca," he said softly, his eyes full of something I hadn't seen in 17 years, understanding. "I spent all this time thinking you had abandoned me. 17 years trying to be the son my father wanted. Then last week I found these documents and I finally understood." He paused, his voice thick with something that sounded like regret. "I was going to stop the wedding. But then I saw your name on the guest list." He swallowed, his jaw tightening, seated in the kitchen. I blinked, my heart pounding. "And I knew," he continued, stepping even closer, "that you deserved to hear the truth."
From me?
I could barely breathe. 17 years of betrayal. 17 years of lies. And now, for the first time, truth. The wedding was over. But the story was just beginning. I let out a dry laugh, shaking my head.
Of course, I said.
Rachel always did have a flair for drama. Scott turned to my sister, his expression calm but firm. "The wedding's off, by the way," he announced. "And you might want to check your father's company's financials before he tries to arrange another merger." Rachel let out a furious shriek and hurled her bouquet in our direction. She missed. Instead, the bouquet smacked into a champagne pyramid, sending dozens of crystal glasses shattering to the floor. Gasps echoed through the ballroom as champagne flooded the expensive marble tiles. But Scott barely glanced at the mess. He simply straightened his jacket and spoke over the chaos. "As my first act as CEO," he declared, "Ritter Industries is establishing a $200 million foundation for educational initiatives in underserved communities." The room erupted into stunned murmurs. Then Scott turned to me. "We need a director who understands both education and community organizing," he said, his eyes searching mine. "Interested?" Before I could answer, my mother suddenly sprang up, her voice full of forced enthusiasm. "Rebecca, darling," she gushed. "I always knew you had potential." I turned to her, feeling nothing but exhaustion. "Save it," I said flatly. "I think you've helped enough for one lifetime." Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, but I was already looking back at Scott. "The foundation job," I said, crossing my arms. "Does it come with a corner office?" A slow, familiar grin spread across his face. "Only if you have dinner with me first," he said. "I know this little coffee shop in New York." Something inside me softened. Rachel, still reeling, stomped her foot so hard that her designer heel nearly snapped. "You can't do this," she shrieked. "Daddy, do something." But her father wasn't listening. He was already rushing toward the exit, phone in hand, probably calling his accountant in a desperate attempt to salvage what was left of his empire. Aaron Ritter Sr., still seated at the front, stood up shakily. His face was pale, his voice rough. "Son," he said, "think about what you're doing." Scott turned to him, his hand closing gently around mine. "Oh, I have, father," he said. "For 17 years. He glanced at me, his grip warm and steady. "The company's image could use some updating, don't you think? Less corporate greed, more social responsibility." His voice softened as he looked at me fully. "Rebecca always said the measure of success isn't how much money you make, but how many lives you improve." Rachel let out another dramatic wail, but I barely heard her. Because at that moment, I was looking down at the small silver ring on my finger, the same one I had never taken off. The ring Scott, had given me in a tiny coffee shop 17 years ago, when we were just two kids with dreams bigger than the world would allow. Scott followed my gaze, then reached out, gently touching the band. "You kept it," he murmured, something raw in his voice. I met his eyes, a smile tugging at my lips. "You came back." And for the first time in 17 years, I felt like I had finally found my way home. "I do?" That was my answer. 7 months later, it was still true. The Ritterton Educational Foundation had already funded 52 community programs, bringing resources, schools, and scholarships to underserved neighborhoods. Every time I saw a child walking into a classroom we helped build, every time a struggling student got the support they needed, I knew we were making a difference. Rachel, ever the survivor, landed on her feet, marrying a minor European prince who, ironically, had strong socialist beliefs. The last I heard, she was adjusting to a life of advocating for wealth redistribution while still enjoying designer shoes. My parents, realizing that philanthropy was now the family brand, suddenly became very interested in charitable giving. They made grand speeches about helping the less fortunate, though their invitations to family events mysteriously kept getting lost in the mail. Aaron Ritter Sr. quietly retired to a villa in France, stepping away from the empire he had spent his life building. To my surprise, he sent a letter, a real one, handwritten, not typed by an assistant. It was an apology, a real one. I framed it next to a newspaper article about the foundation's launch. The headline read, "From Corporate Scandal to Community Savior, How Ritter Industries is Redefining Success." I liked looking at it, not out of pride, but as a reminder. A reminder that people can change, that the right thing, once set in motion, has a way of building momentum. And as for me and Scott, we still go to that little coffee shop in New York. He still orders black coffee, no sugar. But now, when we talk about changing the world, we actually do it. The small silver ring I had worn for 17 years finally had a companion, a simple gold band that matched it perfectly. Inside, an inscription written in Scott, familiar hand. To my Scott, who came back to what really matters. Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about getting it right.
Growing up, it was just me and my mom. My dad left when I was little, and he's just a faint memory now. My mom worked really hard, taking on multiple jobs to keep us going and to make sure I could focus on school. Because of her efforts, I got a scholarship that helped me get through college without a lot of debt, which is rare these days. I studied business management because I wanted to succeed and never be as poor as we were when I was a kid. After graduating, I moved to the city. It was tough at first, living in a tiny apartment and eating instant noodles more often than I'd like to admit. But I got a job at a big company, starting as a junior and quickly working my way up. A few years later, I wasn't just an employee. I was running a whole department. It was more than a job to me. It was my domain. I made sure everyone knew they were important. I always told the new employees, treat this job like it's yours, and soon enough, you'll be leading the team. The team was great, full of good people. When I got promoted to head of the department, we celebrated at a local bar. It was a cozy place with cold beer and lots of laughs. Here's to Michelle, the boss lady. Samuel, one of my oldest colleagues, said, raising his glass. Everyone joined in, and the sound of clinking glasses filled the bar. Thanks, everyone. We're all in this together. Here's to kicking more butt and taking names. I shouted, and the team cheered. That night, amid the celebrations, I noticed a guy named Scott. He saw me looking and came over with a confident smile. What's the celebration for? He asked, leaning against the bar. Just a little career boost. I'm the new head of my department now, I replied. I tried not to sound like I was bragging. That's impressive. Must be a tough job, he replied, nodding. I'm Scott, by the way. Michelle. Nice to meet you, Scott. We started talking more seriously than I planned. It turned out Scott was a financier who knew numbers like I knew project plans. Over the next 4 months, our casual dates turned into weekends together, and soon I was spending more time at his place than mine. His apartment was amazing, with high ceilings, a stunning view, and a warmth my small rental couldn't match. One evening, as we looked over the city lights from his balcony, Scott turned to me with a serious look on his usually playful face. He took my hands, and I could feel his nervous energy. Michelle, these past months with you have been the best of my life. I know this might seem fast, but when you know, you just know, right? He said, his voice a mix of certainty and hope. I nodded, my heart racing. He pulled out a small box from his jacket and opened it to reveal a sparkling ring. Will you marry me, Michelle? Yes, Scott, absolutely yes, I replied, my voice thick with emotion. Just like that, We were engaged. Engaged to a man who really saw me and loved every part of me, even the tough parts. The day I was supposed to meet Scott's parents, I was nervous. As Scott drove us up to a huge mansion with a driveway longer than my entire apartment block, it hit me they were very wealthy. Stepping out of the car, I felt the weight of the place. The house looked like something out of an old British movie, all brick and ivy, with gargoyles staring down like they knew I didn't belong. Scott squeezed my hand as we approached. We walked up to the huge oak doors. "You'll be fine, Michelle," Scott whispered, but he sounded like he was trying to convince himself too. The door swung open, revealing Mr. and Mrs. William. His suit probably cost more than my rent, and her dress looked like something from a magazine. The foyer was massive, with a sparkling chandelier overhead and portraits of stern-looking folks with titles like Sir and Lady. "Michelle, lovely to finally meet you. I'm Jacob, and this is my wife Shirley," Mr. Williams said smoothly, with a hint of an English accent. Mrs. Williams smiled at me, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Pleased to meet you both," I managed, trying to keep my voice steady. As we moved into the dining room, Scott whispered tips about which fork to use, but his words jumbled in my head. Dinner felt like sitting in a freezer, the air cold with judgment. Mr. William pointed to a portrait of a stern-looking man with a thick beard. "That's Sir William Blake, a direct ancestor from United Kingdom who came over in the 1900s to establish our family here," he said proudly. "Really impressive," I said, trying to sound enthusiastic, but it was hard to eat with every move being watched. I reached for what I thought was the salad fork, but the silence that followed told me I'd messed up. I glanced at Scott for help, but before he could whisper anything, Mrs. Williams' voice cut through. "Perhaps things are done differently where you come from, dear," she said sharply. "Sorry, still getting the hang of all this," I mumbled, my cheeks burning. Scott tried to smooth things over with a story about us, but his parents were more interested in watching me struggle with the dessert spoon. I felt smaller with each course, their stares heavy on my shoulders. After the icy dinner, we moved to the Watertown expansive living room. The plush carpets and heavy curtains made the room feel even more suffocating than the dining hall. I sank into one of the ornate chairs, feeling like an exhibit in a museum about commoners. Mrs. William, perched elegantly on the edge of her seat, leaned forward. "Michelle, dear, tell us more about your family. Your upbringing must have been quite different from ours." I hesitated, feeling Scott's tense gaze on me. "Well, it was mostly just me and my mom. My dad left when I was little," I began. "When I was really young, and I don't remember him much. Mom did everything to raise me on her own. She's a nurse." The room fell silent. Mrs. Williams stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the wood floor like a scream. "This is unacceptable," she declared with disgust. "We are descendants of an ancient English lineage. We have standards and traditions. I cannot, will not, allow my only son to marry someone without pedigree or knowledge of her own lineage." Mr. William, who had been silently observing, finally spoke, each word heavy. "It's essential for us that our family ties are strong and well documented. Michelle, can you even name your great-grandparents?" I felt my face heat up with embarrassment. "Only know about my maternal grandparents," I confessed softly. Mr. William rolled his eyes with clear contempt. "This is exactly what we feared," he muttered. Scott finally intervened, his tone firm but pleading. "Mom, Dad, please. Michelle is kind, hardworking, and she loves me. Isn't that what should matter?" His mother's gaze was steely. "Respect and adherence to our family standards are what matter, Jacob. If Michelle is to join this family, she must learn our ways and respect where she comes from, even if it is nowhere significant." Their words stung, cutting through the warm feelings from earlier in the evening. But Scott was looking at me, his eyes begging me to go along with it. I nodded reluctantly, agreeing to their terms. Fine, I said, try to keep my voice steady. I'll learn about your family and your traditions. Mrs. Williams seemed somewhat pleased by my concession. Good. You'll start by familiarizing yourself with our family tree and understanding who each person in those portraits is. It's not just about names, Michelle. It's about respect for our lineage. As they continued talking about their expectations, I felt a part of me shrivel up. The evening had turned from a simple meet and greet into a trial by fire. I had agreed to their demands, but at what cost? As the room filled with discussions of ancestors and noble deeds, I couldn't help but feel alienated from these people and, oddly enough, from the parts of Scott that were tied so tightly to them. The weeks following that stiff dinner were a whirlwind. I barely had time to catch my breath between my job and the etiquette and style courses Mr. and Mrs. William insisted I take. My day started with the alarm buzzing before sunrise and ended long after the sun had set, leaving me feeling like a zombie. Elbows off the table, Michelle, the etiquette instructor gently reminded me during one session. And remember, the soup spoon moves away from you when you scoop. I nodded, trying to mimic her movements, but my mind was on a million other things, like the pile of work waiting for me at the office and the never-ending wedding plans. You're doing well, she reassured me, her voice soothing. These things take time to become second nature. I gave her a weak smile. Thanks. It's just a lot, you know. As if on cue, my phone rang. It was Mom. I excused myself and stepped outside to take the call, pressing the phone to my ear while finding a quiet corner in the bustling city. Hi, Mom. I greeted her, my voice more tired than I intended. Michelle, darling, how are the wedding preparations going? She asked, her voice filled with excitement and a hint of concern. Hesitated, not wanting to worry her. It's all good. Learning a lot, even picked up how to waltz. I said, trying to sound cheerful. There was a pause, and I knew she wasn't entirely convinced. You sound exhausted, honey. Are you getting enough rest? You know all this shouldn't be so hard. You need to take care of yourself. I chuckled weakly. I'll try, Mom, but there's a lot to juggle right now: etiquette classes, dance lessons, work, and wedding planning. Just remember what's important, Michelle. It's you and Scott at the end of the day, not all these rules and lessons. Her words were comforting, but as soon as we hung up, the weight of reality settled back on my shoulders. I was caught between pleasing Scott's parents and keeping my sanity. Every day felt like a marathon with no finish line in sight. Back inside, I resumed my training. The instructor's voice became background noise as I practiced the proper way to hold a wine glass, pinch the stem, not the bowl, apparently. In the rare moments of downtime, I'd find myself staring at the ceiling, wondering if all this was worth it. The constant scrutiny, the endless classes, the cold looks from Mr. and Mrs. William whenever I slipped up, which was more often than I'd like to admit. One evening, as I was about to fall asleep, my phone buzzed. It was Scott, his text lighting up the screen. How was your day? Miss you. I stared at the message, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. I wanted to tell him everything, to pour out my frustrations and fears, but I held back. Instead, I typed a simple, "Miss you too." Long day, but all good. As I set the phone down, the silence of my apartment felt overwhelming. Was this how it was going to be? Pushing through the exhaustion, smiling through the stress, all to fit into a world that seemed increasingly alien to me. The big day finally arrived. The venue was full of flowers, fancy dresses, and the faces of the city's high society milling about. My stomach was in knots as I stood in my long white dress, trying to catch my breath. My mom came over, adjusting a stray curl on my forehead. "Everything will be just fine, Michelle," She reassured me with a soft smile. I wanted to believe her, but the minute the ceremony began, any hope of a peaceful wedding evaporated. Scott's parents were on a warpath of superiority. Mr. William greeted guests boastfully, and Mrs. William quickly pointed out to anyone within earshot how they had made everything possible. As the guests settled, I tried to mingle, but Mrs. William pulled me aside with a frosty smile. "Michelle, dear, make sure our friends are taken care of. Fetch some drinks. There's a good girl," she instructed, gesturing towards a group of elderly gentlemen discussing politics loudly. But I started, only to be cut off by her sharp glance. "No buts. You're practically family now. Show some initiative," she snapped. Reluctantly, I carried trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres between tables, my dress trailing behind me. The weight of the fabric and the task made me feel more like a servant than a bride. I caught glimpses of Scott laughing and chatting, oblivious to my plight. As I passed another round of drinks, I overheard Mrs. Williams' voice rise above the chatter. "Michelle will be serving us tonight. It's good practice for her, don't you think?" Her tone was condescending, her eyes scanning the crowd for approval. That was the last straw. I'd approached her, my hands shaking slightly, but my voice firm. "I am not a waitress at my own wedding. There are staff here who are supposed to do this." Mrs. Williams stood up, her expression one of mock surprise. "You should be grateful we allowed such a simple girl into our family. Remember your place, Michelle," she hissed, her words like daggers. I felt a flush of anger rise to my cheeks. "This is my wedding, not a performance for your friends," I said, louder than intended. The room fell silent, and all eyes were on us. Scott, catching the tail end of our exchange, stumbled over with a glass of champagne in hand. "What's going on here?" He slurred slightly, his eyes not fully focusing. "Your mother is treating me like a servant at our wedding, Scott. This isn't what today is supposed to be about," I said, frustration boiling over. Scott looked between me and his mother, his expression clouding. "Michelle, why are you making a scene? Just do what my mom asks. It's not a big deal." "Not a big deal. Scott, this is our day, and your mom is ruining it." I shot back, disbelief and hurt swirling together. He took a long sip of his champagne before speaking. "Look, Michelle, you should be happy I even chose you. There were plenty of girls better than you, prettier, richer. You're making a fuss over nothing." His words stung like a physical slap. I recoiled, the realization hitting me hard. The man I loved, the man I was about to marry, didn't see us as partners. To him, I was just another accessory, something to be molded into the perfect image his parents wanted. As I clutched my bouquet tighter, feeling like I might crumble right there, my mom came over. She took one look at me and wrapped me in her arms, giving me a hug that seemed to hold the world at bay. "Honey, do you love this man? Do you really want to marry him?" she whispered, her voice filled with worry. I shook my head, barely able to speak. "No, Mom, I can't do this. I don't want to." Mom nodded, her jaw set in that determined way I knew all too well. She gently took the bouquet from my hands and guided me to a chair, her touch reassuring. Then, with surprising sprightliness, she approached the DJ, asked for the microphone, and turned to face the gathered crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please?" Her voice, clear and steady, cut through the murmurs, drawing every eye in the room to her. There was a hush, the kind that precedes a storm. She took a deep breath and turned to face Mr. and Mrs. William directly. "I have something important to share about truth and pretense," she began, her gaze unwavering. "I went to the same school as Jacob and Shirley William. Back then, they didn't have an English accent or talk about noble blood. Their families were hard-working folks just like ours." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Jacob's father was a mechanic, and Eleanor's mother served tables at the local diner. She paused, letting the words sink in. The portraits, the accents, the surname, they bought them all to create a past that would hide where they really came from. The room erupted into whispers, guests turning to stare at the water town, their faces a mix of shock and disbelief. Mrs. Williams stood up, her face red, the facade of aristocracy melting away. "That's preposterous, but my mom wasn't finished. To think that you would stand on these fabrications and look down upon my daughter, judging her worthiness based on a lie. Michelle is worth 1,000 of your false titles. She is real, something you've long forgotten how to be." The guests were now openly murmuring, their looks of fascination turning to disdain as they gazed at the water town. Mr. William tried to speak, his accent slipping into something less refined, more desperate. "We did what we thought was best." "For whom?" My mom cut him off, her voice fierce. "For your son, for society, or just for your own shallow pride?" The confrontation had drawn everyone's attention, and now the room was buzzing with tension and revelations. The water town seemed to shrink, their grandeur dissolving, leaving only the plain truth of their origins. Scott's face twisted with a mix of shock and anger. He stormed up to me, his voice barely a hiss as he leaned close. "You've ruined everything, Michelle. You've disgraced my family, and now you're questioning if I want to marry you after this spectacle." His words stung, but before I could respond, he grabbed my arm, pulling me closer. "I'll teach you how to be a good wife, one who knows her place and obeys." His threat hung in the air, heavy and chilling. I pulled my arm back with all my might, stepping away from him. The room was dead silent now, everyone's eyes on us. This was the man I had intended to marry, the family I was about to join. No, this couldn't be my life. I took a deep breath, my mother's earlier strength flowing through me. "There will be no wedding," I announced loudly, making sure every guest heard. "I regret that I ever considered marrying someone who truly matches the arrogance and deceit of his parents." Murmurs filled the room, some of shock, others of support. Scott stood there, mouth agape, as if trying to catch the words and stuff them back into my mouth. My mother came to my side, her presence a comforting shield against the chaos. Together, we walked through the crowd, our heads held high. In the weeks that followed, news of the Watertown disgrace spread through the city. Their fake lineage and high society standing crumbled like a house of cards. People who once revered them now crossed the street to avoid their shame. They sold their mansion and moved away, seeking a fresh start where their past wouldn't haunt them. As for Scott, I heard bits and pieces, rumors of a downward spiral, nights spent trying to drink away the scandal. I didn't know if they were true, and frankly, I didn't care. He had shown his true colors, and they were too dark and twisted for me to ever look back. "Thank you, Mom," I said to her one evening as we sat in our modest living room, a stark contrast to the opulent falsity I had almost married into. "For everything, for being there, for standing up for me, for helping me see the truth before it was too late." She took my hand, squeezing it gently. "I'll always be here, Michelle. You are my daughter, and I raised you to be strong and true. No man, no family can ever make you less than what you are." We sat there, the TV chattering in the background, a normality that felt refreshing. I had lost a fiancé but gained back my life, my self-respect, and more importantly, my future. After the whole wedding debacle, going back to work felt like walking into a sanctuary. My colleagues, who had heard about the chaos, were nothing short of supportive. "Michelle, you dodged a bullet, Pearl," Samuel said as soon as I walked into the office. He was leaning against my desk, a steaming cup of coffee in his hand, which he handed to me as a peace offering or maybe a welcome-back gift. "Thanks, Samuel. Feels good to be back," I replied, taking the coffee and savoring the familiar bitter warmth. "And yeah, that bullet was more like a cannonball." Nicole chimed in from her cubicle across the way. "Anyone who makes you serve guests at your own wedding is no husband material. You deserve way better, hun. I smiled, grateful for the camaraderie. I think so too. It's nice to be back where I'm appreciated for what I do, not for the family I might have married into. As the days turned into weeks, the support from my team never wavered. During this healing time, I met Robert. He was a friend of a friend, just a genuine guy with a quick smile and an easygoing attitude that was infectious. We met at a small get-together, just a few friends hanging out on a Saturday afternoon. He was there, laughing at something silly when I walked in. "Hey, you must be Michelle," he said, standing up to greet me. "I've heard a lot about you. All good things, I promise." "Thanks, Robert. I hope they didn't embellish too much," I replied, trying to match his easy demeanor. We hit it off instantly. His family was the polar opposite of the Watertown. The first time I met his parents, they welcomed me with warm hugs and genuine smiles. "Michelle, we're just glad Robert found someone who makes him so happy," his mom said, pulling me into a hug as soon as I stepped through their front door. It was refreshing, the simplicity of it all. No pretenses, no demands, just mutual respect and acceptance. Robert and I weren't rushing anything. We were taking our time getting to know each other beyond the surface level. Back at work, my boss called me into his office one day. "Michelle, I just want to say we've all noticed how you've handled everything. It's not been easy, but you've managed to keep your performance top-notch." I nodded, unsure where this was leading. "We think it's time for another promotion. You've proven you can handle just about anything, and your leadership has never wavered." Leaving his office, I felt a surge of pride. With a new relationship developing, a career on the rise, and the respect of those I cared about, I was finally in a place where I felt I belonged.
I remember the day my parents sat me down in the living room like it was yesterday. I was 7, wearing my favorite purple dress with butterflies, holding my worn teddy bear. Mom and Dad told me they wouldn't be living together anymore. They were calm, no yelling, no fighting. Just two grown-ups who didn't love each other like before, deciding to go their own ways. I didn't cry. Maybe I was too young to understand what it all meant. They split everything so neatly. Mom got the house, Dad moved to a new apartment, and I got 2 bedrooms. The custody plan was simple. 1 week with Mom, 1 week with Dad. Dad, being the way he was, made sure Mom and I were taken care of financially. About a year later, Dad met Angela. I remember when he first introduced her to me at a diner. She had kind eyes and a warm smile. Her son Adam was sitting next to her, playing with some fries. "Hi, Laura," Angela said, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "Your dad's told me so much about you." Adam looked up and asked, "Are you going to be my sister?" I liked them right away. Angela didn't try too hard or act fake like some of Dad's other dates. She was just herself. And Adam, who was 4 years younger than me, became the little brother I never had. Around the same time, Mom started dating Jeremy. He moved in pretty quickly, and I noticed Mom seemed different, distracted, always touching her stomach when she thought no one saw. They got married at City Hall, and 3 months later, my half-sister Rachel was born. I remember standing in the hospital room, looking at this tiny pink baby in Mom's arms. Jeremy hovered over them, completely focused on his new family. I stood in the corner, feeling like I didn't quite fit in, like I was watching a picture being made that didn't include me. That same year, Dad and Angela got married too. Their wedding felt different. They made sure Adam and I were part of everything. Angela even let me help choose her dress. During the ceremony, Dad said special vows to both Adam and me. "Today, I'm not just gaining a wife," he said, his voice full of emotion. "I'm gaining another child to love. And our 2 amazing kids are gaining a bigger family." That night, after the wedding, Angela tucked me into bed at their house. She kissed my forehead and said, "You know, Laura, I always wanted a daughter. Thank you for letting me be part of your life." I hugged her tightly, feeling grateful. Even though my family wasn't like other people's, I realized I was lucky to have one place where I truly felt at home. Life at Mom's house changed after Rachel was born. It wasn't like anything big or mean happened. No yelling or bad treatment. It was just like I started fading into the background, like I wasn't really there anymore. Mom quit her job to stay home with Rachel, and everything became about the baby. At first, I told myself it was normal. Babies need a lot of attention, right? But after a while, it started to hurt. At first, it was little things, then it became bigger. I remember standing outside school in the rain after a parent-teacher conference. All the other kids had left with their parents, and I was still waiting. Mrs. Dennis, my fifth-grade teacher, stayed with me for almost an hour before she finally called Mom. Oh no, was that today? Mom's voice crackled on the phone.
I'm so sorry.
I was at Rachel's mommy and me class. Can we reschedule? But we never did. That day, Jeremy picked me up. He barely looked at me, too busy talking on the phone about work the whole drive home. Then there was my 11th birthday. I woke up so excited, thinking Mom would say, "Happy birthday," at least. But when I ran downstairs, I found her fussing over Rachel in the kitchen. "Mom," I said, standing in the doorway. "Do you know what day it is?" She looked up, distracted. "Thursday? Oh, I need to take Rachel to her doctor's appointment." My heart sank. "It's my birthday." Her eyes widened. "Oh, Laura, I'm so sorry. We'll celebrate this weekend, okay? I just have so much going on today with Rachel's checkup." But the weekend came and went, and no one mentioned my birthday again. I started spending more time at Dad's house. It felt different there. Angela always made sure my favorite snacks were stocked in the pantry, and Adam and I spent hours playing video games or doing homework together. Dad never missed any school events, and Angela often came too. She'd take pictures and cheer me on like I was her own daughter. Over time, I stayed at Dad's house more and more. A few days turned into weeks, then months. Mom barely noticed. She was always busy with Rachel, feeding her, playing with her, or taking her to playdates. When Jeremy came home from work, he'd kiss Rachel on the forehead and head straight to his office. Sometimes I felt like I didn't exist in that house at all. I wondered if anyone would even notice if I disappeared. After about 7 months of mostly living at Dad's, he decided to make it official. "I talked to your mom today," he told me one evening. "I think it makes sense for you to live here permanently. You're here most of the time anyway, and I told her I'd stop the alimony payments since I'm taking care of you full-time now." A few hours later, Mom showed up at the door. She was all worried looks and loving words. "Sweetie, I've missed you so much," she said, hugging me tightly for the first time in what felt like forever. "I've been thinking, and I want us to go back to our original arrangement. I want you home with me half the time, like before." I was 13 by then, old enough to see through it. The sudden concern, the promises, it wasn't about missing me. It was about the money. Without Dad's alimony checks, she wanted me back at her life. Rachel, who was 5 by then, started making things worse. She'd follow me around with a smug little smile, waiting until Mom and Jeremy were out of earshot to say mean things. "Daddy says you're not really part of our family," she told me once while I was doing homework at the kitchen table. "He says you're just visiting." I tried to ignore her and focus on my math, but she kept going. "Mommy and Daddy love me more than you. Last night, Daddy told Mommy he's tired of you being here. And Mommy said just wait until she turns 19. Then the money stops, and she'll be gone." It hurt, of course. How could it not? But by then, I'd learned to protect myself, to build walls around that kind of pain. I had Dad and Angela, who showed me what real family love looked like. I had Adam, who was more of a sibling to me than Rachel would ever be. Still, hearing your own mom basically count down the days until you're out of her life, that leaves scars. The years dragged on until I finally made it to high school graduation. During the ceremony, I sat between my two families, Dad, Angela, and Adam on one side, Mom, Jeremy, and Rachel on the other. It felt like sitting between two different worlds. After the ceremony, Dad hugged me tight. "We're so proud of you, Princess," he said. Meanwhile, Mom and Jeremy were already talking about me leaving before we'd even left the parking lot. "So," Jeremy said, jingling his car keys, "have you started packing yet?" They didn't ask about my college plans. They didn't care that I'd gotten into a business program with a partial scholarship. They didn't even pretend to be interested in my future. All they wanted to know was when I'd be out of their house. 3 weeks later, I moved all my things to Dad's house. I remember sitting in the living room, feeling nervous about asking for help with college expenses. I knew Dad would never say no, but it still felt hard to ask. "Dad, I got accepted into the financial analyst program," I said, holding the acceptance letter and fiddling with the edges. "I got a partial scholarship, but..." Before I could finish, Dad and Angela smiled at each other. "We've already got it covered, honey," Angela said, pulling out a folder. "We've been saving for your college since you were 8. That summer, I worked at the Silver Spoon Cafe and saved every penny I could. I usually worked morning shifts, so my afternoons were free to spend with my real family. Adam and I went to movies, Angela taught me how to cook proper meals for living in the dorm, and Dad was just Dad, always there with advice or a hug when I needed one. Mom never called to ask about my plans, never stopped by, never showed any interest in the fact that her oldest daughter was about to go to college. By then, I'd stopped expecting her to care. College started in a whirlwind of new faces and experiences. My dorm room was tiny but cozy, and my roommate Olivia was nice, though we never became close. Between classes and working at the campus cafe, I barely had time to breathe. But I made sure to call Dad and Angela at least twice a week. They visited whenever they could, and Adam always tagged along, complaining about carrying my laundry basket but bringing my favorite snacks from home. Mom never called. Not even once. My 20th birthday came and went without so much as a text from her. I told myself not to check my phone, not to hope, but it's hard to let go of old habits. That night, I made the mistake of looking at her Facebook page. There they were, dozens of pictures of her perfect family. Mom, Jeremy, and Rachel at the beach. Rachel's dance recital. Family dinners. Holiday celebrations. Each photo perfectly staged, each caption talking about family times and loving my family. I wasn't in any of them. Of course not. I'd been cut out of their lives a long time ago. After that, I threw myself into my studies. I wanted to prove to myself that I didn't need their approval to succeed. Time passed quickly, and before I knew it, I was walking across the stage to get my diploma in financial analysis. Dad cheered so loudly you'd think I had just won an Olympic medal. After graduation, Angela approached me with a job lead. Her brother Roger owned a successful investment firm in our hometown, and she had told him about my hard work and good grades. The interview with Roger went well. He was professional but friendly, a lot like Angela. He got straight to the point but made me feel comfortable. "Your credentials are impressive," he said, looking over my resume. "But I want to be clear. The fact that you're my sister's stepdaughter doesn't give you any special treatment here. You'll have to prove yourself like everyone else." "I wouldn't want it any other way," I replied. I got the job and moved into a small one-bedroom apartment near the office. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. I worked harder than ever, taking on the tough projects no one else wanted, staying late to fine-tune financial models, and creating detailed growth strategies for our clients. The results spoke for themselves. My clients' portfolios grew significantly, and the company's revenue went up. Roger noticed. He didn't play favorites, but he rewarded hard work. The raises and bonuses I earned were because of my efforts, not because of family ties. When I got my first big bonus, I decided to spoil my real family. I bought Dad a new set of golf clubs to replace the ones he'd been using for 16 years. I got Angela a spa weekend package because she never treated herself. For Adam, I bought the latest gaming console since he was still using his old one from high school. Watching them open their gifts and seeing their smiles made me feel so happy. I realized I didn't need to be in one family's photo album. I had found my place in a better family. After 6 years of hard work, I had a solid plan for my future. Every month, I saved a portion of my salary, researching the housing market to find the perfect home. I wanted something simple but cozy, maybe with a small garden. Most of all, I wanted to make a big down payment so my mortgage would be affordable. Then one day, everything changed. I was at my desk reviewing quarterly reports when my phone rang. The number on the screen was one I hadn't seen in years. "Laura, sweetie," Mom's voice came through, overly sweet. "I've been thinking about you so much lately. I almost dropped my coffee. 10 years of silence, and now this? How are you, Mom? I asked, keeping my voice calm. Oh, honey, I miss you. We all do, she said, her tone overly sweet. Why don't you come over for dinner this weekend? Rachel's home from college, and Jeremy's making his famous pot roast. Curiosity got the better of me, so that Monday I drove to my old house in my new Mercedes. It wasn't flashy, but it was reliable and professional. Rachel opened the door and looked me up and down, trying to hide her curiosity. Nice car, she said, skipping a proper greeting. The house was the same furniture, same family photos on the walls.
Still none of me.
Mom rushed over to hug me like no time had passed. Darling, you look fantastic. So professional in that suit. Jeremy, doesn't she look successful? Jeremy nodded and pulled out a chair for me at the table. We heard you're doing very well at Roger's company. Word is you're one of their top performers. All through dinner, they asked questions about my job, my salary, and my car. Mom kept mentioning how expensive everything was these days, especially with Rachel in college. That's such a beautiful watch, Mom said, grabbing my wrist to get a closer look. Must have cost a fortune. I smiled politely. It was a birthday gift from Dad and Angela. Of course it was, she said, her smile tightening. They always did spoil you. That dinner turned into more invitations. Suddenly, Mom wanted to be involved in my life again. She called regularly, stopped by my apartment unannounced, often bringing Rachel with her. They invited me to family dinners, but something about it all fell off. Rachel would wander around my modest apartment, snooping. This place is kind of small, she said once, her tone dripping with judgment. I thought you made good money. I kept my answer short. It suits my needs. Mom would chime in, but surely you're planning to upgrade soon with your salary? I'd just smile and change the subject. Their sudden interest in my life made me uneasy. One Friday afternoon, Rachel came over, supposedly to spend some sister time. While I was in the kitchen making coffee, I heard her gasp. Oh my God, she exclaimed from the living room. I walked in to find her staring at my laptop screen. I had forgotten to close my banking app after paying some bills. Is that really how much money you have saved? She asked, her eyes wide. I quickly closed the laptop. It's not polite to look at other people's private information, Rachel.
She ignored me.
Why are you saving so much? What's it for? I hesitated, but decided there was no harm in telling her. I'm planning to buy a house soon. I want to make a good down payment, so my mortgage payments are manageable. Rachel just nodded, but I could tell she was thinking about something. She left shortly after, saying she had to meet some friends. The very next day, Mom called to invite me to dinner. As soon as I sat down at their dining table, I knew something was going on. Mom had that look, the one she used to get before asking Dad for more child support. Rachel tells me you're quite the saver, she said, passing the potatoes. That's wonderful, honey. You know, Rachel's been having such a hard time with college expenses, and she'll need an apartment after graduation. I took a bite of my food and stayed quiet. It would be so nice if her successful big sister could help her out, Mom continued, her tone full of suggestion. Family helping family, you know. I put down my fork. I don't understand what you're getting at, Mom. Oh, come on, Laura, she said, dropping her sweet tone. You're clearly doing well for yourself. Rachel needs help with an apartment, and you have more than enough saved up. It's the right thing to do? I stared at her in disbelief. The right thing to do? You mean give Rachel the money I've been saving for a house? Well, you're already established in your career, Jeremy said, jumping in. Rachel's just starting out. She needs the help more than you do. I'm not established, I said firmly. I'm working hard and saving for my future. I'm not giving Rachel my savings. Mom's face darkened. So, you're just going to let your sister struggle while you sit on a pile of money? After all we've done for you. I almost laughed. All you've done for me? Like what? Forget my birthdays? Ignore me for years? Push me aside for Rachel? You're being selfish, Jeremy muttered, not meeting my eyes. A real sister would want to help. A real mother would have been there for both her daughters. I shot back, standing up. I'm taking care of myself first. Rachel is your responsibility, not mine. The silence was deafening. Mom sat there with her jaw clenched while Jeremy glared at his plate. Rachel wasn't at the dinner, but I could imagine her reaction when they told her later. Poor Rachel, with her selfish big sister who wouldn't give her a free apartment. 3 weeks after that disastrous dinner, I left for a business trip to Thailand. Roger had trusted me with an important client presentation, and I knew I'd be out of touch most of the time due to the time difference and my packed schedule. I'll be gone for about 10 days, I told Mom over the phone, trying to be polite despite our recent argument. Just letting you know I'll be out of contact. Oh, overseas? How nice for you, she said, her tone oddly interested. The trip went well, but when I landed back home, my phone blew up with notifications as soon as I turned off airplane mode. Banking alerts, dozens of them. My hands started shaking as I scrolled through. Account transfer, $2,550. Account transfer, $3,800. The world felt like it was spinning. I rushed home, threw open my laptop, and logged into my banking app. There it was, a massive transfer to an account I didn't recognize. But the name on the account? Maria Shriver. My mother. I drove to their house, furious, with screenshots of the transactions pulled up on my phone. I pounded on their door. Jeremy opened it, giving me a smug look that made my blood boil. Where is she? I demanded, shoving past him. Mom was sitting in the living room, as calm as could be, flipping through a magazine. Oh, you're back. How was your trip? She asked casually. I shoved my phone in her face. What is this? How did you transfer money from my account? She barely glanced at the screen. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie to me, I shouted. It's right here. A transfer to your account. How did you do it? Finally, she put down her magazine and smirked.
Fine.
Yes, I transferred the money. Rachel needs an apartment, and you weren't being cooperative, so we helped ourselves. My voice shook. How did you even get into my apartment? Mom reached into her purse and pulled out a key. Remember when I borrowed your bathroom that day I visited? It only takes a minute to make a copy. I felt sick to my stomach. Give me my money back.
Now.
Or I'm going to the police. Mom actually laughed. Don't be ridiculous. You won't go to the police. I'm your mother. Besides, you have a good job, no responsibilities. You can save up again. Rachel needs this more than you do. We've already found her the perfect apartment. I'm serious, I said, cutting her off. Return my money. Or what? Mom sneered. You'll send your own mother to jail?
Please.
You don't have the spine. Jeremy grabbed my arm, pushing me toward the door. I think it's time for you to leave, he said coldly. I turned back to Mom, my voice steady despite my shaking hands. This is your last chance. Return the money.
Now.
I warned them to give me back my money. Mom's only response was a smirk and a wave goodbye. Jeremy shoved me out onto the porch and slammed the door in my face. That night, I went to the police station. It was quiet as I sat across from Lawrence Welk, steadying my hand to fill out the complaint form. I had all the evidence. Screenshots of the unauthorized transfers, text messages about my business trip, and everything else that proved what happened. Jeremy called me later that night. His tone switched between threats and fake concern. You need to withdraw the complaint, he demanded. Do you know what you're doing to your mother? She's crying. I hung up. Let her cry. I'd cried plenty over the years because of her. The legal process moved quickly. The evidence was overwhelming, and Mom's smug confession didn't help her case. In court, she tried to play the role of the remorseful mother. Tears streamed down her face as she promised to return every penny. I just wanted to help my younger daughter, she sobbed. I let my maternal instincts cloud my judgment. I almost laughed out loud. Maternal instincts? Since when? The judge wasn't buying it. Mrs. Shriver, your so-called maternal instincts led you to commit premeditated theft and fraud against your other daughter. The only reason you're not going to prison is your agreement to make full restitution and your lack of a prior criminal record. Mom got a suspended sentence and was ordered to return my money within 31 days. I also got a restraining order against her and Jeremy, just to be safe. Dad and Angela stood by me through everything. They sat behind me in court, brought me meals when I was too drained to cook, and never once said, "I told you so," about letting Mom back into my life. "You did the right thing," Angela said after the sentencing. They needed to learn they couldn't take advantage of you anymore. Adam, in his usual way, tried to make me smile. "Well, at least now you know which family actually loves you." He was right. The lines were clear now. I had my real family, Dad, Angela, Adam, even Roger, who had been incredibly supportive through it all. And then there were the others, Mom, Jeremy, and Rachel, who had shown their true colors in the most dramatic way possible. 7 months have passed since then. My money is back in my account, earning interest while I search for a house. I've got my eye on a beautiful 4-bedroom colonial with a fenced backyard, just 10 minutes from Dad and Angela's place. The mortgage paperwork is being finalized, and this time, I'll be the only one with the keys to my home. Mom still tries to reach out now and then, either through relatives or mutual acquaintances. She says she's changed, that she's sorry, and that she wants to make things right. But I'm done giving chances to people who see me as nothing more than someone to take advantage of. Yesterday, I had dinner with my real family to celebrate my upcoming house purchase. As we sat around Angela and Dad's dining table, laughing and making plans for my housewarming party, I realized something important. The family you choose can be better than the one you're born into. And sometimes, letting go of toxic people is the healthiest choice you can make. In 3 weeks, I'll be signing the papers for my new house. Dad is already planning to help me paint the walls, and Angela keeps sending me links to furniture she thinks would look great in my living room. This is what family is supposed to be: people who love you, support you, and would never dream of hurting you for their own gain. As for Mom, Jeremy, and Rachel, they can keep their perfect family photos and their manipulative games. I have something far better: a real family, peace of mind, and soon, a house with exactly 1 set of keys.